There was a spreadsheet open on my laptop the night everything changed. I remember the exact moment. It was 11:47 p.m. I know because I kept looking at the clock, trying to decide if I should close the computer and go to sleep or keep going. The spreadsheet was a budget breakdown from my mother's 60th birthday trip, 14 days across Italy and France, starting in Rome, ending in Nice. I had been building it for 3 months. Hotel names, room categories, restaurant reservations, a private boat tour off the Amalfi Coast, a wine tasting in Burgundy that I had to call to book directly because they didn't take online reservations. I had a tab for flights, a tab for ground transportation, a tab for activity deposits already paid. Her name was at the top of the document, right in the header. Mom's 60th European celebration. My name was nowhere, not because I forgot to put it, because I was never invited. I need to back up, because if I just start from that night, none of it will make sense. People will think I'm being dramatic. They'll say, well, why did you keep doing things for people who treated you like that? I've asked myself that question so many times that I used to think I was broken for not having a clean answer. But I do have an answer now. It just took me a long time to say it out loud. I'm 31. I work in financial planning. I've been financially independent since I was 22, when I graduated, moved to a different city, and started building a life that had nothing to do with the one I grew up in. The one I grew up in was my mother, my stepfather, and his 2 kids from his first marriage, his daughter, who I'll call my stepsister, and his son. My stepfather came into the picture when I was 9. He was fine, quiet. He didn't dislike me, but he also didn't particularly notice me. His kids, though. His kids were another story. My stepsister is 2 years older than me, and she has always been the kind of person who understands exactly which version of a situation to present to which audience. To outsiders, she was charming. To my mother, she was the daughter my mother always wanted. Funny, sociable, easy. To me, she was consistent in a different way. She never said anything overtly cruel. She was too smart for that. She just made sure I knew, in 100 small ways, that I was the one who didn't quite fit. My mother let her. That's the part that took me years to fully sit with. Not what my stepsister did. She was a kid too, for part of it. But my mother, who watched it happen, who sometimes, I think, agreed with the framing. When I was 16, I overheard my mother telling a friend on the phone that she worried about me, that I was difficult to connect with, that I had always been a little closed off. She wasn't wrong that I was closed off. But she seemed genuinely confused about why. I didn't say anything. I just went back to my room and studied. Getting good grades was the one thing I could control. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had rebuilt something of a relationship with my mother. Not close, we were never close, but functional. Civil. I called on Sundays, I sent gifts on birthdays. When she had a health scare at 56, I flew back, took time off work, handled the insurance paperwork because she didn't understand it, and my stepfather's approach to medical bureaucracy was to ignore it until it resolved itself. She was fine. The scare turned out to be manageable. She told me while I was still there that she didn't know what she would have done without me. She held my hand and said it. I flew back to my apartment and felt something strange. Not warmth exactly, but hope. The low, cautious kind. Like maybe we were finally moving towards something different. Then her 60th birthday started getting planned, and I understood that nothing had changed at all. My stepsister called me in January. The birthday was in September. She said she had a vision for a trip to Europe and wanted to know if I could help make it happen. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I said yes. I said yes because I'm a financial planner and I'm good at logistics. I said yes because I thought participating would mean I was included. I said yes because some part of me, despite everything, still wanted to be the person who showed up. For 7 months, I worked on that trip. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that I put more hours into planning that birthday celebration than some people put into planning their own weddings. I negotiated with hotels. I found a small family-run villa outside Florence that wasn't listed on any of the major booking sites. I found it through a travel forum, emailed the owner directly in my very broken Google-translated Italian, and got us a rate that would have been impossible otherwise. I created a day-by-day itinerary with alternatives for bad weather. I had a shared folder with every confirmation number, every address, every contact name. My stepsister would forward things occasionally. Her brother had opinions about which city to start in. My mother wanted a specific kind of birthday dinner, something special, not touristy. I found that too. Nobody asked how I was doing on it. Nobody offered to help. When I sent the full itinerary in July, my stepsister responded, "This is perfect. You're so good at this." That was it. That was the whole response. I told myself it was fine. In August, my stepsister sent a group message. It had my mother, my stepfather, his kids, and a few extended family members I barely knew. It was a packing list and a reminder about the departure date. I was not in that group message. I read it because she had accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, I still don't know, sent it to me separately before adding me to the thread. Or maybe she never intended to add me to the thread. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. I told myself there had been a mistake. I messaged her directly and asked if I'd been left off the group chat. She took 4 hours to respond. Then she said, "Oh, I thought you knew. We only have room for 8 on the villa booking." It kind of just worked out to family. I am family. I didn't say that. I just stared at the message. I had booked the villa. I had my name on the original inquiry. I had exchanged 11 emails with the owner. I had selected the rooms. I had paid the deposit from my own account, with the understanding, the clearly stated understanding that everyone would reimburse me. And I was not invited. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment because I think people sometimes expect this kind of story to have a clean emotional arc. Shock, then anger, then resolution. Mine was messier than that. What I actually felt first was shame, a hot, humiliating flood of it, like a child who had convinced herself she'd finally been included in something, only to find out she'd imagined the whole thing. Then I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from doing the same calculation over and over for years, trying to figure out what you'd need to do, who you'd need to become, to make certain people finally see you, and realizing the math was never going to work out. Not because you're doing it wrong, because the other side of the equation was never actually open to a solution. I sat with my phone on the kitchen counter. I didn't cry. I went to bed. The next morning, I opened the spreadsheet. I want to tell you what I noticed, looking at it fresh in the morning light. 3 months of work, 14 days of itinerary, 41 line items across 6 tabs, a total trip value, including the deposits I'd already paid, the restaurant reservations made under my name, the private boat tour with a non-refundable booking, of just over $19,000. Most of it coordinated by me. 12,000 of it tied to reservations that existed because I had personally negotiated, emailed, or called to arrange them. I scrolled to the Villa tab. I looked at the confirmation email from the owner, whose name I now knew well enough to ask about his daughter because he had mentioned her in one of our exchanges. He had been so pleased that someone was taking the trouble to write in Italian, even badly. I thought about the trip I would not be on. I thought about my mother who had let this happen, who had almost certainly known about it and said nothing. And I thought, I am done. Not loud, not dramatic. Just done. I called the villa owner that morning. His English was limited. My Italian was terrible. We had managed 11 months of correspondence across that gap, so we managed this too. I explained that there had been a change in the booking and I needed to discuss the reservation. We worked through it over 2 calls. He was gracious. He was sorry to hear things had changed. The deposit, which was mine because I had paid it, was returned to my account, minus a small administrative fee that I considered a completely fair cost of reclaiming my own money. Then I went through every other booking. The restaurant in Rome, reserved under my name, credit card on file. I called and canceled. The private tour on the Amalfi Coast, I had the confirmation in my email. I sent a cancellation request. The wine experience in Burgundy, the one I'd had to call directly because they didn't do online reservations, I called directly again. The woman who answered remembered me. She was surprised to hear things had changed, but she handled it kindly. One by one, I went through every line item, every reservation that had my name, my card, my contact information attached to it. By noon, the trip no longer existed in the form my family had been counting on. What they had left What my stepsister had actually booked herself, which was very little, was a pair of flights and a few hotel nights that she'd added late, mostly in cities I had originally taken off the itinerary because I'd found better options. I did not call my mother. I did not send a message to the group chat. I did not explain myself to anyone. I did send one email to my stepsister. It was 4 sentences. I've been thinking about the trip and I've decided to step back from the planning entirely. I've canceled the reservations that were made under my account. You'll want to rebook anything you still need. I hope everyone has a nice time. I hit send at 12:34 p.m. and then I closed my laptop and went for a walk. The response came faster than anything she'd ever sent me about the actual trip planning. My phone started going off at 1:17 p.m. My stepsister, then her brother, then my stepfather, then my mother. I stood on a sidewalk outside a coffee shop and watched the notifications come in. I read them in order, the way you might read a transcript of something you already knew the ending of. My stepsister said I was being vindictive. Her brother said I was ruining everything over nothing. My stepfather said this was not the time for whatever point I was trying to make. My mother said she was very hurt and she couldn't believe I would do something like this and that she expected more from me. That last one I read twice. She expected more from me. I thought about the villa owner and his 11 emails. I thought about the restaurant in Rome and the non-refundable deposit I'd paid and eaten. I thought about 7 months and 41 line items and a shared folder full of documents that no one had ever once acknowledged the weight of. I put my phone in my pocket and ordered a coffee. I went back to my apartment. I sat with what I had done for a long time. I want to be clear, I did not feel triumphant. Not immediately. What I felt was something more like vertigo. The specific dizziness of having done something you can't undo, even when you know it was right. I had known on some level for a long time that I was going to reach this point. I had not known when. I had not known what the specific thing would be that finally made the equation stop being worth solving. It turned out it was a group message I wasn't added to. Which sounds small. I know it sounds small. But it was the last confirmation of something I had been slowly, reluctantly accepting for most of my life, that in my mother's house, I had always been the person who handled things, not the person those things were for, the coordinator, the fixer, the one who was good at logistics, not a daughter, not someone worth a seat at the table. I was done setting the table for people who would never offer me one. My mother called me 3 days later. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was mostly composed of variations on disappointment, how I had made her birthday about myself, how I had hurt the whole family, how she didn't understand what she had done to deserve this. I listened to it once. I didn't call back. My stepsister texted 2 weeks before the trip to say that she had managed to rebook some things, but the villa was gone and the restaurants I'd chosen were either fully booked or no longer available for their dates. She said the trip was going to be fine, but it wasn't what it could have been. She didn't apologize. She said, "I just don't understand why you felt you needed to do this." I thought about responding. I typed out a few different versions. One of them was long. It explained everything, laid out the history, made the case. I deleted it. Another was short and factual. I deleted that too. I sent nothing. Because I realized sitting there that she already knew why. She had always known. Explaining it wasn't going to change anything. It never had. The people who needed me to explain it would not understand the explanation, not because they were incapable, but because understanding it would require them to admit something they had no intention of admitting. I owed them nothing, not even a reply. They went on the trip. I know, because my mother eventually posted a few photos the way people do. A table at a restaurant. A view from somewhere coastal, everyone looking fine, a little tired maybe, not quite the version of the trip I had spent months imagining. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because it was strange to watch a version of something I had built from nothing, without me in it, and feel almost nothing. A small, distant ache. Less than I expected. What I felt more strongly, around that same time, was something I didn't have a clean word for at first. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even relief exactly. It was more like space, a sense that something had been taking up room inside me for a very long time, something that required constant maintenance and generated nothing in return, and now it was gone. I had more room to think, more room to breathe. I used it. I took a long weekend by myself that September, the same week they were in Europe. I drove to the coast. I stayed in a small inn I found by accident, the kind of place with uneven floors and the breakfast that was better than it had any right to be. I sat on a rocky beach for most of one afternoon and did nothing. Read a little, watch the water. I thought about my mother, about all the Sundays I had called, all the gifts and visits and quietly handled paperwork, the insurance forms and the flight back and the hand she had held, and the things she had said, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And how that had felt like warmth, even though it wasn't warmth. It was utility. It was relief that the useful person was still there. I wasn't angry. I was past angry. I was somewhere quieter than that. I thought, I hope she had a nice birthday. I genuinely mean that. I hope the trip was fine. I hope the restaurants were good and the weather held and she got the things she wanted out of it. I also thought, I'm done. Not done in a dramatic way. Not in a way that required a conversation or a declaration or a scene. Just done in the way that something ends when you finally stop feeding it, quietly, without ceremony, without waiting for permission. My mother called 3 more times over the following 2 months. I answered once, about 6 weeks after the trip. The conversation was short. She said she hoped we could move past this. I told her I was doing well. She said she missed me. I said I hoped she was taking care of herself. She asked if I was still angry with her. I thought about that. Still angry. As if anger were the thing, and as if eventually it would run out and then we would go back to how things were before. Sunday calls. Gifts on birthdays. Me fixing things, quietly, from a distance. Grateful to be included in the parts of her life that required something from me. I'm not angry, I said. That was true. So we're okay? She asked. I didn't answer that the way she wanted me to. I said, I'm doing well. I really am. And that was also true. We got off the phone shortly after. She has tried a few times since. I respond when I feel like it. Sometimes I don't. Here's what I want to say, because I think it might be the part that matters most. For a long time, I believed that if I was useful enough, capable enough, generous enough, patient enough, the people who were supposed to love me would eventually see me. Really see me, not just as a resource, not just as the competent one who handled the things that needed handling, but as a person, as their person. I spent a lot of years doing things that were genuinely hard, genuinely costly to me in time and energy and hope, waiting for that recognition to come. It did not come, and I want to tell you, because maybe you are doing something similar. Maybe you are in a relationship or a family dynamic where you have convinced yourself that the next thing, the next sacrifice, the next careful act of love will finally be the one that tips the balance. I want to tell you that the recognition you are waiting for does not live in the people who are not giving it to you. It's not hiding, it's not on its way, it's not waiting for the right moment. The people who are going to see you are already doing it. The people who aren't, they've made their choice even if they'd never say it out loud, even if they genuinely don't realize it themselves. Canceling those reservations was the truest thing I did for myself in years. Not because it was revenge, though I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something clarifying about watching the plan I'd built simply cease to exist for people who had never made room for me in it, but mostly because it was the first time I had let the math be honest. I had stopped doing the calculation with false variables. I had looked at what was actually there. What was actually there was nothing worth the cost I was paying, so I stopped paying. I'm still a financial planner. I'm still good at logistics. I still like planning things. I have a trip of my own coming up next spring, just me and 2 friends I've known since college, people who have never once made me feel like an afterthought. We're going to Portugal. I've been building the itinerary for 2 months and it's genuinely fun. Nobody has to be negotiated with. Nobody sends a group message I'm not in. When I send a draft plan, my friends respond with actual thoughts, actual enthusiasm, actual opinions. It's a small thing. I know it's a small thing. It doesn't feel small. You are allowed to stop building things for people who will never let you through the door. You are allowed to close the spreadsheet. You are allowed to let the reservations go. You are allowed to plan something for yourself. finally, and take up your own seat. There's something nobody tells you about being the capable one in a family. That capability, over time, gets mistaken for willingness, not by accident. People learn what you'll absorb. They learn it because you keep showing them, year after year, that there is no cost, that you'll plan the trip and not be on it, that you'll handle the paperwork and not be thanked for it, that you'll sit with hope in your chest, waiting for the recognition that doesn't come, and then wake up the next morning and start over again. I did that for a long time. I'm not ashamed of it, but I'm honest about it now, in a way I couldn't have been 5 years ago. What I understand now is that how we treat people is a choice, and that choice has a shape to it. My stepsister didn't exclude me from that group message by accident. My mother didn't stay quiet about it by accident. Those were decisions, dressed up as oversights. The difference between an oversight and a pattern is that a pattern repeats, and this one had been repeating since I was 9 years old. I just kept looking for a reason to call it something smaller than what it was. The decision I made, to cancel those reservations, to stop being the infrastructure for people who had never offered me a seat, that wasn't revenge in the way people sometimes mean the word. It wasn't about making them suffer. It was about finally making the cost visible. Because here's what I've come to believe. When you keep absorbing the cost of other people's choices, you're not being kind. You're being dishonest. You're allowing a fiction to continue. The fiction that what they're doing is acceptable, that it costs nothing, that it can go on indefinitely. The most honest thing I ever did for my family was let them feel what my absence actually meant. That takes a particular kind of courage that doesn't get talked about enough. Not the loud kind, not the confrontation, not the ultimatum, not the speech. The quiet kind, the kind where you just stop, where you close the spreadsheet and make the calls and send the 4-sentence email and go for a walk. Where you do the hard thing without performing it for anyone. Integrity, I think, is mostly that, not the grand gesture. The small, private decision to stop participating in something that costs you more than it gives, even when no one is watching, even when no one will applaud you for it. My mother called it vindictive. I call it honest. The fallout was real. The discomfort was real. There are relationships in my life now that will never be what I once hoped they'd be, and I've had to grieve that quietly. But on the other side of that grief is something I didn't expect. A cleaner life. Relationships that hold their actual weight. Friends who answer my messages with enthusiasm. A trip to Portugal I'm genuinely looking forward to. Small things, solid things. You don't have to set yourself on fire to prove you're warm. You're allowed to stop. And when you do, when you finally let the math be honest, you'll find there's more room than you realized. Room for people who see you. Room for plans that include you. Room, finally, for yourself.